Okay, so we're almost ready. We're going to start right in the middle of Gimel Amid Beis, Ezehu Bein Hashmashos. What is the definition of the Bein Hashmashos period? We'll just review that a little bit.
We see the translation is just between sons. That would be
Right, that's a literal translation.
That's the literal translation, but it doesn't, I mean, there's only one sun, right? So it means the the position between the two, or the time between the two sun positions, I guess you would say, between sunset and nightfall. Okay, Ezehu Bein Hashmashas. So what is that period, what we in English call twilight? So Mishatishka Hachama Kedei Sheyahalech Adam Chatzi Miol Divrei Rabbi Nechemya. Rabbi Nechemya is of the opinion that it is from sunset until a person walks, the time it takes for a person to walk a half a mil, which is similar to a kilometer, which so that would be, the rabbis estimated that it takes about 18 minutes to walk a mil. And so therefore we're talking about 9 minutes. That's Rabbi Nechemya, but he says there's clearly a minutes long period that we call twilight. Now we haven't really seen the ramifications of this. What would be the halachic ramifications of what is nighttime and what's Bein Hashmashos? Bein Hashmashos would be considered to be a suffix period. So therefore, any situation which you did during Bein Hashmashos, if it's suffix Yom, suffix Laila, would potentially put you in that limbo. I don't know what status I'm in. And therefore, it could have a number of different ramifications. So for example, let's say I touched Truma, and I'm not sure whether I went to the mikveh during the day or Bein Hashmashos. So if I went to the mikveh during the day, and then I I achieved purification. So then by touching the Truma, if it's nighttime, so then the Truma has not been defiled by me. But if it's still day, so then the Truma has not been defiled. If it's Bein Hashmashos, for example, it's a suffix whether this Truma is Tameh or not, in which case we wouldn't be able to burn it because you can't burn Truma that's not Tameh. So I'd have to figure out another way to dispose of it. That would be just one illustration off the top of my head.
Because you can't even hold it go strict, whatever strict means.
Correct.
Right? Because in
That's
this
right.
case, you
So
can't do one and you can't do the
right.
other.
That's right. That's right. So Rabbi Yossi Omer, Bein Hashmashos keheref ayin v'lo yachlu la'amod alav chachamim. Rabbi Yossi, however, disagrees. And he says that Bein Hashmashos is a split second. It's like the blink of an eye. And therefore, it's nearly impossible to have done something over Bein Hashmashos to get into that suffix position. Well, we'll see, not necessarily so, but it seems like he says there is not a minutes long period that is called Bein Hashmashos. It's like the blink of an eye. And furthermore, he says that our Chachamim don't even know when it is. Is it at the beginning of sunset, after sunset? Is it at the end of after sunset? Is it in the middle?
You would agree it's within those 9 minutes.
It seems that way, although we're not so sure. Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbi Acha havu yasvin. So Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Acha were sitting in study. Amar Rabbi Yossi LaRabbi Acha lo mistavra sov chat simil de Rabbi Nechemya keheref ayin de Rabbi Yossi. So it seems, would it not seem, he says, that the end of this 9-minute long period of Rabbi Nechemia would be that blink of an eye. In other words, does it not seem that that blink of an eye period would be at the very conclusion of the 9 minutes of Rabbi Nechemia? So, like, if you look in the Art Scroll Hebrew, he says, "Shebein hashmoshos l'dab Rabbi Yossi shuhu keref ayin chal miyad la'achar sof hazman shel mahalech chatzimil la'achar shkiyas hachama." He says that would be at the very end, or immediately after, is what he writes. U'ledas Rabbi Yossi kol meshech hazman hazeh shel mahalech chatzimil la'achar shkiyah dain yomu. And therefore, the entire period of the 9 minutes for Rabbi Yossi is still complete daytime, and therefore he doesn't really have any significant time period between day and night. It's still completely day until nightfall. And you got that blink of an eye of Bein Hashmashas. And so Rabbi Achaz says back to Rabbi Yossi, and he says, Af ana saver kain. Yes, I hold that way as well. And however, but now he's going to say, that's the way I understood it as well. However, Rabbi Chizkiya lo amar kain. But Rabbi Chizkiya did not agree. Ella kol heref ayin v'heref ayin shebechatzi de Rabbi mil de Rabbi Nechemia safeku. But Rabbi Chizkiya was of the opinion that the entire 9 minutes is open for safek. In other words, Rabbi Chizkiya says, we don't know when that blink of an eye takes place. So for all intensive purposes, just like Rabbi Nechemia has a safek, whether it's day or night during that entire 9-minute period, even according to Rabbi Yossi, there's a safek when that blink of an eye is taking place. It could be taking place immediately after sunset. It could be taking place at the very end, but as
even in the middle,
as it's turning dark, or even in the middle at some point along the way. So there's an infinite number of possibilities, if it's a blink of an eye, as to when that Bein Hashmashos period comes out.
Is 9 minutes the maximum?
No, it's that seems to be the opinion for now. I can't definitively tell you that we're not going to see another opinion, but that's the opinion for now. So Amar Rebbe Mana, Kashiate Kume de Rebbe Yechezka, he says, I presented the following question to Rebbe Nechemia, Kataninan Taman, when we were studying the Mishnah in Maseches Zavim. And so first of all, I'm not sure if any of you have studied Maseches Zavim. A Zav the Torah describes a man who has some kind of abnormal seminal discharge. They usually translate it in English as some kind of gonorrhea. He has some kind of abnormal seminal discharge. And if this occurs over a 3-day period, he has 3 discharges, so then he becomes tummy even after 1. But if he has it 3 days in a row, he becomes a high-level tumah, such that in order to purify himself, he's going to have to bring a korban. Okay, so that's a certain kind of tumah. So he says, Ra echas biyom, ve'echas bein hashmashas. The Mishnah over there says that if a man had, let's say on a Monday, he had a seminal discharge, and then during the day, and then bein hashmashos, he had a second seminal discharge. The echas bein hashmashos, let's see, echas bein hashmashos or the echas lemachar. Or if he had his first seminal discharge on Monday, bein hashmashos going into Tuesday, and then he had his second seminal discharge on Tuesday. Now here, what we're talking about is where this is going to be appended to a third seminal discharge, either the day before or the day after. Im yodeya shemiktsas hariya mehayom umiktsasa lemachar vaday letuma ulekarban. So in that kind of situation, so then if we know he says, Im Yodeya Bevadai, When you know for sure that you had one seminal discharge on Monday and then the next one on Tuesday, so then harehu vadai zav letuma ular karban. So then we know for sure that you are a certainly high level zav. You're tame for 7 days, and you have to bring a carbon at the end of that 7 day period. Meaning that let's say you had seminal discharge 1 on Sunday, seminal discharge 2 on Monday, and then seminal discharge 3 Monday night. So then you would certainly be tame for 7 days, and you'd have to bring a carbon.
Because Monday night is Tuesday.
Because Monday night is Tuesday.
Yeah.
However, v'im safek shemikzas hariyah mehayom mikzas l'machar vaday l'tuma v'safek l'karban. If, however, you have a discharge that is during the Bein Hashmashos period, kagon shalonim shecha hariyah kol kach milifnei Bein Hashmashos ad la'acharav. So what the Mishnah is basically saying is as follows. If the discharge that you had started Bein Hashmashas and then continued, the discharge continued until nighttime. So it was sort of like, it may be, how long does the discharge take? Maybe like the time it takes to have a small urination, right? So it was a discharge that took 10 seconds. So if it started Bein Hashmashas, but the 10-second discharge crossed into nighttime, so then you know you're certainly going to have to bring a carbon. If, however, the entire 10-second interval of discharge only took place during Bein Hashmashos, so then we declare you to be tamei for 7 days, but it's a suffix whether you have to bring a carbon because Bein Hashmashos is suffix yom, suffix laila. So, like the commentary says, Shahadavar suffix shim haisa reiyas Bein Hashmashos kula bayoma kula balayla ein kan elashtei reiyos vim haisa mixas hariyah bayoma mixasa balayla harehi nechlekes l'shnaim v'yesh kan shalosh reiyos l'chiyuv carbon. So he says as follows: if the discharge was completely during the day or completely during the night, so you only have two discharges. But if you have a discharge that takes place over the course of both day and night, if let's say the discharge stretches over, the part of it is during the Bein Hashmashos period, and part of it is after at nighttime, so then you're going to have 3 discharges because we view it as if there's one on Monday and one on Tuesday, and then you append it to the one that was on Sunday. So in other words, in a situation where one of the first discharge was, let's say, on Sunday, and then the second one is Bein Hashmashos on Monday evening, going from Monday evening to Monday night. So then, if we view Bein Hashmash, if that discharge is completely part of it during the day and part of it during the night because it stretches starting in the day and going into the night, so then we look at that as 2 separate discharges, one Monday afternoon and the other one the beginning of Tuesday, because it's Monday night is Tuesday. So then you have a total of 3.
This doesn't seem to fit with the just we have already, because it sounds like a 10-second, whatever it is, discharge isn't clarifying.
Well, so 1 second. So this will make sense according to Rabbi Yossi if it's keherafayin, but we can identify when the herafayin is. So Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef Ba'a Kumi Rabbi Yochanan. So in any event, so he says, so basically, Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef presents this question on this Mishnah. Mantana, who is the Mantana Ri'ia Nechlekes L'Shnayim? Who is of the opinion that if a discharge can extend over Bein Hashmashos, where it starts during the day extends into Bein Hashmashos and then goes into the night, that we can consider it two separate discharges because it's partially during the day and partially in the night. So Rebbe Yossi Omar Le. So he said to him, it must be Rebbe Yossi, because according to Rebbe Nehemiah, no one can have a discharge for 9 minutes. I mean, you would that would be impossible. Yeah, so it's just not possible. So he says, V'lidvarav, as the Art Scroll says, V'lidvarav achein yitachin davar zeh. According to Rabbi Yossi, it would be possible. Shiriyah hamatchila lifnei ben hashmashos v'nimsheches la'achar avadei miksasim min hayom miksasim min halayla. Then you could certainly say that a discharge that starts before ben hashmashos continues after ben hashmashos, is partially during the day and partially during the night. And therefore it's divided into two discharges. But you can't explain it according to Rebbe Nehemiah, because how could a person have a discharge for such a long time? So, and therefore, if that's the case, so Kishisa, so therefore, I asked him the following question. Al daitcha da'at omar kol heref ayin veheref ayin shebechad simil de Rebbe Nehemiah safeku. If you're going to say that, like Rabbi Chizkiah says, so that we don't know when that blink of an eye takes place, meaning that it's a suffix, so then lama omar le kishise. So then why would you say like the Art Scroll says, Nimsa Shafla Reb Yossi, Efsha Ladas Bevada Shemexas Ariya Be'oma Mixasa Balayla. It's also impossible, according to Rebbe Yossi, for this scenario to ever play out, because the discharge, in order to ascertain that one discharge, the beginning of the discharge was on one day and the end of the discharge was on another day, you would have a suffix for that entire 9-minute period, according to Rebbe Chizkiah. Because we don't know when that blink of an eye period is. And therefore the entire, so the question therefore is, even according to Rebbe Yossi, how could you ever have a scenario where you're able to ascertain that the beginning of the discharge was on Monday and the end of the discharge was on Tuesday? So the Gemara then says, and this is why it's so difficult to read sometimes, because you don't really know when the question begins and the question ends and the answer begins. So lema amar le kishise. So the question is, why did you say that I had this question on Rebbe Chizkiah? You can answer l'cheshiyavu Eliyahu v'yoymar zehu bein hashmashos. Why not just say that this Mishnah is speaking theoretically, but it cannot be realized today, but it will be realized when Eliyahu Hanavi comes. Meaning, when Eliyahu Hanavi comes, he will reveal to us when that moment is, along the continuum of Rabbi Nehemiah's Bein Hashmashos. And once Eliyahu reveals it to us, then in theory, when that time period arrives in the future, then it will be possible for a person to have a 10-second discharge, part of which started during the daytime, and part of it which ended in the nighttime. You're right. Today, even according to Reb Yossi, it's not possible for such an event to occur because we don't have the halachic clarity. But there will come a time in the future when we will have that halachic clarity. That's the Gemara's suggestion as far as how to interpret the Mishnah. But then the Gemara says, but man palig. And like the Art Scroll says, Kolomar im meduber kishiyovo Eliyahu v'yavar lanu emasi hu oso heraf ein shenechshav bein hashmashos, harei vada yodiya lanu gam madino shel oso heraf ein atzmo. So then why do you have to say that this only goes according to Rebbe Yossi? When Eliyahu Hanavi comes, he'll be able to tell us what is the definition of Bein Hashmashos. In Bein Hashmashos, dino kayoma dino kalayla. In other words, right now we have a suffix: is bein hashmashos daytime or is bein hashmashos nighttime? So why do you have to say that this Mishnah only goes according to Rebbe Yossi? If we're waiting for Eliyahu Hanavi to come, he'll be able to clarify what the status of bein hashmashos is entirely.
Right.
And so therefore, this whole machlokas between Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Yossi will be moot entirely,
There won't even be that concept.
because there won't be the concept of bein hashmashos being suffik yom, suffik laila. And therefore, va'al karchach, efo, ein kavanas hamishna l'cheshayavu Eliyahu, and therefore we cannot suggest that this Mishnah is referring to messianic times when Eliyahu Hanavi will come, because, and therefore the question goes back, according to you, Rabbi Chizkiah, this remains a question according to you. So therefore, umechrachim efa. So the bottom line is, as the commentary says, umechrachim efa lomar sheheref ayin shel Rabbi Yossi hu la'achar zmano shel Rabbi Nechemia v'lo keRabbi Chizkiah. And therefore, our conclusion is that really heref ayin is like we originally thought. According to Rabbi Yossi, the heref ayin is a definite split second that we can ascertain when that split second occurs at the end of Rabbi Nechemia's 9-minute bein hashmashas. And therefore, this Mishnah makes sense according to Rabbi Yossi. But it will not make sense according to Rabbi Nechemia, and that'll be true even in this world where we have no clarity on what bein hashmashas is. Okay, so far so good?
So what's Ramban or Ramban? What do they say? Is there any shaila? Is there any concrete?
You mean as far as what is the psak? I don't think we paskin like Rebbe Yossi. I mean, I think we paskin that bein hashmashos is suffik yom, suffik laila, for the full however long bein hashmashos lasts. I think that there's a bit of a dispute whether I believe there's another opinion as to what bein hashmashos is, but we're not at the end of that sugya is. So, and as the commentary says, la'achar shesiyama haGemara ladun bizmano shel bein hashmashos. After the Gemara now has concluded its discussion of what is bein hashmashos, okay, overisi l'diyon be'inyan hazman shebo mistayim halayla u'maschel hayom. Our Gemara is now going to engage in the next logical discussion, which is when does night end and day begin? So we've talked about when day ends and night begins. Let's now talk about when night ends and day begins, which is very relevant to us guys who get up early, right? So Rabbi Chanina chavrehun de Rabbi Yochana de Rabbanon. So Rabbi Chanina was a friend of the Chachamim, which is a very strange way to describe him. He's a friend of the Chachamim. He's not one of the Chachamim. He's a friend of the Chachamim, which I don't know what that even means. He says, boy, he asked the following question. Kama da'at amar ba'arvis nir ushlosha kolchavim. He says, just like you say that in the evening, when 3 stars are visible, afal pi sha'achama netuna be'emtza harakia, even though it's not 100% dark, and the light of the sun is still somewhat visible in the western horizon, Lailahu, it is still nighttime, and Umar af b'shachar is kain. Why don't you say the same thing in the morning? Meaning that as long as there are 3 stars visible, that it's still considered completely night, even though the sky in the eastern horizon is still, has become already light. We should say that as long as 3 stars are still visible, it's still considered to be night. He says, and yet we don't say that. Like the commentary says, umipnei ma misha'ala amud hashachar yom hu l'chol dinei haTorah. Why do we have this accepted rule that once you can see light in the eastern horizon, it is considered to be daytime, even though there are stars that are still visible? Okay, so Amar Rabbi Abba. So Rabbi Abba tries to answer the question. Ksiv, Hashemesh yatsa al haaretz, v'lo ba tzoara. That the sun came down on the earth, and Lot came to Tzoar. So that is describing how Lot at sunset came to the town of Tzoar as he was escaping the conflagration of the city of Sodom.
Was that the fifth city?
No, Tzoar, I'm not sure if it was the fifth city, but it was an adjoining city to Sodom, and that's where Hashem told Lot to go. Hashem told Avraham to save Lot, that he was going to save Lot, and Lot comes to Tzoar. So, Uchasiv, Uba Hashemesh v'taher, and the Achar Yochal min HaKadoshim. So the Torah, when it talks about the sun going down, that the Torah says, let's see. Sorry. Nemar b'Torah al tchilas hayom. When does Lot come to Tzoar? Lot comes to Tzoar at day rise, as the daybreak was arriving. Apparently he traveled all night. Finally, as day was breaking, he arrives to Tzoar. And then when it talks about the beginning of night, it says, Uba Hashemesh v'taher, that when the sun goes down and the sky is completely clear of the sun, then a person is allowed to eat kodshim after having gone through purification the day before. So therefore, the Torah uses the language of yatsa, the sun comes out, and the sun goes uba, the sun. So we have for sunrise, we have yatsa, and for sunset, we have ba. But makish yitziyaso libiyaso, ma biyaso mishiyiskasa min habrios, af yitziyaso lechishiyisvada labrios. And therefore, we have a connection that just like when the sun goes down, it is hidden from humanity. It is hidden from the creations of God. So too, when the sun comes up, is when the sun becomes known to God's creatures. Shemirega, like the commentary says, Shemirega shematchila hashemesh latzeit al haaretz umatchil ora leheraot, that as soon as the sun becomes known to people, so then harei hi nodas umiskala le'enei habrios. That's when the sun becomes known to people. People now know as soon as dawn arrives that the sun is coming up. Umeota shak far yomhu afal pishnir madayin harbe kochavim berakia. And therefore, that is considered to be daytime, even though you still have many stars in the sky. So that's the argument of the Gemara. The Gemara says, you're right, there is an inconsistency that at nighttime, as soon as 3 stars are visible, even though the sun, even though the sky is still a little bit light in the western horizon, nonetheless, it's considered to be night. But when it comes to daytime, it's considered day as soon as the light becomes visible. So you asked, that's inconsistent. The answer is it's based on the language of the verses. When we talk about sunset or nightfall, the Torah describes it as the sun comes no longer known to people, meaning shemizman shematchil or hashemesh lihit kasot, that the sun begins to be hidden from people.
Right. You
That's
still see the rays are still there.
You can still see, but it begins to become hidden. So you work conversely with daybreak when it begins to become visible. And that's based on the language, because the Torah uses opposing languages, yatsa and ba. Yatsa means that the sun, that daylight became visible, and ba means daylight began to be invisible. So it all depends on when the beginning of a transition takes place. At nighttime, the beginning of the transition from day to night is when the sun starts to become invisible, and daybreak is when the sun starts to become visible. That's the way the Gemara understands it. So Amar Rebbe Ba, Ksiv Haboker or HaTorah Kara Laor Boker. So we have another answer as to why daybreak is considered to be just when the sun's rays start to become visible in the eastern horizon. It's because the Torah says Haboker or. The Torah calls morning light. The morning was light. So, and that's Lilamdenu sheberega shematchil haor balos hashachar nechshav kavar letchilat haboker. That as soon as light becomes visible, that's considered to be boker, even though there are still stars that are out in the sky.
You don't see the sun, but you see the light of the sun.
We just see the light. So that's really, it's not that the sun is visible yet, but the light is visible,
You
exactly.
infer from that positive that when it starts to become invisible, it must be Lila, right? If
When-
Boker is when it becomes visible, then Lila must be the opposite.
Lila is when it starts to become invisible, but just starting to become invisible. That's the arrival of nighttime. But I don't think it's, maybe it is that the way it's,
There must be.
not sure if this is, okay. Rebbe Ba, by the way, is the same person as Rebbe Abba that you find in the Bavli. Rebbe Ba, Rebbe Abba. We also had Rebbe Bone, was Rebbe Avin. So these are all the same people, different dialects is how you'd call them by their name. And then the Gemara says, I'll give you a third answer. And the third answer is what we'll learn in Mirz Hashem tomorrow.
So those rabbis were traveling back and forth between London and Yerushalayim, and that's why.
Well, it could be that these discussions were the discussions were referenced both among the Babylonian scholars and the Yerushalmi scholars. We don't know whether the rabbis themselves traveled back and forth or whether someone else traveled and related to his colleagues what was going on in Eretz Yisrael.